We're bringing into our regular programming to bring you a live news conference by the opposition National Democratic Congress, which has to do with the PDS controversy which broke in the last few weeks. Let's stay tuned in now. We're going over now to the headquarters of the party, and the General Secretary, Asiedu Nketia, is addressing the news conference.
There's certain anomalies with the agreement that needed ratification. What did the Energy Minister know that the Akufo-Addo government has hidden and does not want Ghanaians to know? In the light of this inconsistency, and knowing this government penchant for cover-up, the minority in Parliament petitioned the United States government, a partner in Ghana's power sector reform, to support our call for an investigation into the scandal. The U.S. authorities obliged and helped to pressurize the Millennium Development Authority, MIDA for short, of Ghana to conduct an independent forensic investigation into the matter in order to ascertain the truth. Just last week, an investigative report by FTI Consulting, a reputable United States-based firm that was commissioned to look into the matter, was made public. The chilling revelations contained in the FTI report confirm the NDC's long-held view that Ghanaians have been let down by the Akufo-Addo government. The reckless manner in which the rules were bent by government for PDS and the irresponsible manner in which the over 20 billion worth of ECG assets were handed over to PDS highlight the prevailing atmosphere of corruption and leadership paralysis that we are currently witnessing under President Nana Akufo-Addo. The PDS concession agreement approved by Parliament contained 45 conditions precedents which had to be fulfilled by PDS before takeover for very good reasons. Under conditions precedent 24 and 31, PDS was required to provide ECG a payment security in the form of a letter of credit or demand guarantee with a value of 350 million United States dollars from a bank. The purpose of this payment security was to safeguard the assets of ECG, such that in case of default by PDS, Ghana through ECG could fall on same as guarantee to recover our losses. This precondition of a demand guarantee was therefore critical to the protection of the assets of ECG and the interests of Ghana in general under the ECG-PDS concession agreement. We all feel scandalized, ladies and gentlemen, that contrary to the effort of Parliament to protect the purse, public purse, in order to safeguard our interests in this matter, the Nana Akufo-Addo-led government shamefully and inexplicably conspired to bend the rules for PDS. That's leading us into the present dire situation. Paragraph 1 of the executive summary of the observation of the FTI report shows clearly that by an act of criminal negligence, President Akufo-Addo reneged on his critical duty and refused to perform simple responsibilities that should have aided the process of securing the all-important demand guarantee or letter of credit from a bank as required by the concession agreement. The extent to which key officials within the Akufo-Addo-led government shirked their fiduciary responsibility to the Ghanaian people in complete disservice to the national interest is something we cannot fathom. The FTI report itself. Per our reading of the FTI report, delays on the part of government gave PDS a convenient excuse to apply for the all-important precondition of payment security to be sidestepped and restructured. In other words, government delayed certain actions, and because of the delay, the PDS used the delay as an excuse to now apply for certain conditions to be changed. So the problem started with government negligence and delays. In other words, the effect of the criminal negligence on the part of the Akufo-Addo government is what gave PDS an excuse not to fulfill the prerequisite of a payment security and provided justification to request for same to be modified into an insurance guarantee. The FTI consultancy report makes a startling revelation of a meeting held on February 19, 2019. At this meeting, attended by the Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, ECG Board Chairman, Kelly Gajepo, MIDA Board Chairman, Martin Eson Benjamin, and representatives of PDS. PDS final approval was given to PDS to change the requirement of a demand guarantee or a letter of credit from a bank into a demand guarantee from an insurance company. So the decision to change from a bank guarantee to an insurance guarantee was taken at a meeting which was presided over by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And all the other members I have mentioned were present at their meeting. And this is contained in the FTI report. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a clear breach of what Parliament had approved under condition precedent 24 and 31 of the concession agreement. This infamous decision was taken by high-ranking government officials, including the Vice President of the Republic, representing President Akufo-Addo, who are all expected to protect the public purse. But it did not end there, ladies and gentlemen. As confirmed by the FTI report, the whole requirement of payment security was converted from a condition precedent to a condition subsequent in flagrant disregard of the supreme interest of the Ghanaian people. i.e., provide a guarantee before we give you the assets of ECG, 20 billion. And then a vice president presides over a meeting and decides that we should give our 20 billion assets away so that later they'll go and look for the guarantee for us. And the nature of the guarantee too has been restructured and changed from a bank guarantee, which is superior, to an insurance guarantee. These were the outcomes of the meeting chaired by His Excellency, the Vice President. Pursuant to this scandalous and irrational amendment by the Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, Eson Benjamin of MIDA, and ECG, PDS subsequently provided an insurance guarantee whose validity is now being challenged by Al-Qut, the Qatar-based reinsurance company, which purportedly issued the said guarantee. As if the migration from bank guarantee to insurance guarantee was not bad enough. Now the insurance guarantee itself, which is of a lower quality to the bank guarantee, is a subject of controversy. And the company which is supposed to have issued is is now saying that they have nothing to do with that guarantee. And this is the actions of a government that has promised to protect our purse. According to the FTI report, crucial advice from government of Ghana's own financial advisors on this transaction for the necessary due diligence to be done before the said insurance guarantee was accepted by ECG, and the assets of ECG handed over to PDC was glossed over by a government whose leader, Nana Addo Dankwa, often pontificates about protecting the public purse. Rather than serve the national interest, government officials, led by the Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, and under the guidance of President Akufo-Addo, decided to sacrifice the nation's interest by changing the key requirements of a bank guarantee to that of an insurance guarantee, thereby jeopardizing the assets of ECG and the interests of Ghanaians. The critical question is, ladies and gentlemen, whose interest was the Vice President acting on behalf of President Akufo-Addo serving when he took that reckless decision, which he knew very well, or ought to know as a professional, was inimical to the interests of Ghana? The people of Ghana were promised that investigations into the alleged fraudulent deal will be completed within 30 days. The report of the independent consultant was presented to MIDA on 3rd September. Instead of acting decisively and timeously on the report, government has resorted to deliberate delay tactics, ostensibly to buy time and shield the high-ranking government officials and cronies of the president. Ladies and gentlemen, the game plan is to let the matter die a natural death as other scandals, and still enable government create conditions for cronies of the president to profit from this clearly corrupt arrangement. Ladies and gentlemen, there is what I will call the Akufo-Addo-led state capture agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to also draw your attention to the real issues of state capture, which per our investigations lit the spark for this whole PDS inferno that now threatens the power distribution sector of Ghana. I'm sure you must have seen a rather strange letter from Honorable Ken Oforiatta to lawyer Akoto-Ampao, a senior partner at the president's own law firm, who is described in the letter as, quote-unquote, chairman of the negotiations committee. I don't know which negotiations committee he chairs. In this letter, the finance minister directed Mr. Akoto-Ampao to consolidate the 51% Ghanaian shareholding under a so-called special purpose vehicle to allow for other so-called Ghanaian investors to acquire shares in PDS. For the three original shareholders, i.e. GTS Power Limited, Santa Power Limited, and TG Energy Solutions Limited, this meant surrendering their shares to the new entity. To expatiate, like these three companies were picked. The persons behind them are known cronies of the president. But they were picked to share the 51% of the equity that should be reserved to Ghanaians. Whatever criteria they use to share, nobody knows. But we know that there is one thing that characterizes all of them. They are all members of the mafia. And then, after the initial heat was gone, the finance minister now comes up and says that maybe the phases that were used have already been used. Ghanaians have accepted the deal. So let us now go and do the proper sharing. So those three companies who were controlling the 51% are now directed to go and collapse their shares into a special purpose company. And in that company, they will now do the real sharing so that the senior prefects and the junior prefects will now have their shares, leaving only 11% out of the 51% to the original shareholders whose names were there. And they said, no, we won't agree. Our faces have been used already. And so luckily, 51% means controlling shares. So that company cannot take any decision without which they disagree with. So they will not allow any special purpose vehicle. They will not allow their shares to be diluted and so on. So now there is problem between one set of looters and another set of looters. I repeat, for the three original shareholders, GTS Power Limited, Santa Power Limited, and TG Energy Solutions Limited, this meant surrendering their shares to the new entity. The finance minister justified this directive on the grounds that it will protect and preserve the indigenous ownership stake in PDS. Ladies and gentlemen, we submit to you that this excuse is a fallacy. If we may ask, what is Ken Ofori-Atta's locus and authority to give such a directive? Because PDS now, with the foreign shareholders and the local Ghanaian shareholders put together, still remain a private company. And there is no indication that government has any shares in PDS. So as a finance minister, what locus do you have to write a letter directing them to surrender their shares into a new vehicle and to be apportioned in a certain way? They have not been able to answer this question. Is he a shareholder, a beneficial owner, or a conduit through which the president seeks to capture the electricity sector for personal benefit? These are questions that we will leave to them to come up to answer. Furthermore, we wish to add that the allocation of the 51% Ghanaian shareholding was approved by Parliament and cannot be modified by anybody without recourse to the legislative body. We are convinced without a shadow of doubt that the needless, baseless, and illegal attempt by Ken Ofori-Atta to restructure the shareholding of PDS is nothing but a well-orchestrated attempt by President Akufo-Addo and his relatives to appropriate the 51% Ghanaian shareholding in PDC for themselves with the objective of taking control of Ghana's power distribution sector for the next 20 years. That is up to 2039. We are reliably informed that the three original shareholders were subsequently required to dilute their respective stake in this newly formed special purpose vehicle. Per this arrangement, they would collectively see their original 51% stake in PDS reduced to a paltry 11%. The remainder of the shares is to be apportioned to cronies of the president as agents who would hold the shares in trust for him and his family. And indeed, there was a letter in circulation that has proposed the new shareholding and who hold what. even though the letter was intercepted before signature. And because of the scandal, it couldn't be pursued. But that leads us to know what they are thinking was as far as these things are concerned. We are reliably informed that these three original shareholders were subsequently required to dilute their respective stakes in these newly formed special purpose vehicles, as I've mentioned already. Per this arrangement, they will collectively see their 51% stake reduced to paltry 11%. The remainder of the shares is to be apportioned to cronies of the president and agents who will hold the shares in trust for him and his family. According to our unimpeachable sources, the original Ghanaian shareholders rebelled, threatened, and refused to participate in this charade. It is this defiance that outraged the Akufo-Addo faction and occasioned the suspension of the PDS concession, with the hope that the resulting pressure will force the compliance of the original shareholders. So their intention of leaking something small or showing us something small about the PDS scandal was not actually to make any changes. They thought that if they threatened the 51% shareholders sufficiently, that if you don't agree, we can cancel the whole deal and put in the people we want. Those defiant people will comply so that they will go back and do their thing the way they had planned it. But unfortunately, the plan led to something else. Their plan was to use the public outrage over the accusations to blackmail and bully the original shareholders to get in line. But the firecracker they launched has turned into a thermonuclear bomb that has exposed their wicked greed. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now conclude on the PDS. Today, against my usual practice, I'm combining two subjects. So I'm going to conclude this PDS very soon, and we will get to satisfy your expectations. I'm sure coming here, you knew why you were coming. This is just... We wish to commend the United States government for heeding to our demands for an independent inquiry into the PDS matter. And here I want us to put our hands together with our minority. Many people were asking, are we no longer independent? Why are we calling United States to do investigation? They brought the money to us, and the money was contributed by their taxpayers. See how difficult it is when we are paying taxes here. It is after paying these taxes in this difficult situation from the petroleum taxes, if they raise something and say we are going to support Togo with it, and you hear that Togo is doing lovey-lovey with that money, will you not be interested in investigating it? So the United States government had a stake in the matter. And that's why we, the honorable members of our minority caucus decided to bring in the US government to help us to unravel this loot. It is clear from the above enumerated facts that President Akufo-Addo, Vice President Dr. Bawumia, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, and Eson Benjamin-led MIDA, who superintended over this process, are complicit and cannot be trusted to resolve this conundrum. I want to take that again. It is clear from the above enumerated facts that the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, Vice President Dr. Baumia, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, and the Eson Benjamin-led MIDA, who superintended over this process, are complicit in the matter and cannot be trusted to resolve this conundrum. We are also aware of frantic efforts by President Akufo-Addo to bring in another company called EDF of France to take over the assets of ECG in pursuit of his ongoing state capture agenda. We hereby, I'm saying we are also aware of frantic efforts by President Akufo-Addo to bring in EDF of France to take over the assets of ECG in pursuit of his ongoing state capture agenda. If that EDF comes, they will require the 51%. The stubborn 51% shareholders will no longer be there, and then there will be opportunity for another selection for the 51%, and that is the point where they can introduce whom they want to introduce to achieve the original agenda. We hereby serve notice to the Akufo-Addo government that any attempt to use this scandal as an avenue to appropriate the assets of ECG for cronies and assigns of President Akufo-Addo will be fiercely resisted by the people of Ghana. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this PDS scandal is an unfolding story. We await government's official position on the FTI report and matters arising, following which we shall return and revisit the subject. The NDC shall remain vigilant and resolute in our quest to ensure that the assets of ECG are protected and the continuous looting of state resources by the Akufo-Addo-led government is finally brought to a halt. That is that with PDS. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure your expectations of this press conference will not be fully met if we do not comment on President Akufo-Addo's speech on corruption at the GBA conference in Takoradi yesterday. This is even more appropriate because of the ever-increasing spate of corruption that has engulfed this government. In fact, our original intention was to deal with PDS separately as we had advertised. But before we could do the press conference, there another matter came which needs to be addressed. You know, if you are in opposition facing a corrupt government and the speed of the scandals is such that it makes it difficult for you even to comment on all of them. So they are even giving us more work. There's a traffic jam of scandals. And we are struggling to cope with it because Ghanaians want to hear us on each and every one of the scandals. Yesterday, at the bar conference in Takoradi, President Akufo-Addo missed yet another opportunity to demonstrate that he should be trusted when it comes to fight against corruption. At a time when he and his government are producing corruption scandals at an unprecedented rate, one would have expected the president to use the opportunity of his address at the bar conference to reassure the nation of credible efforts to weed out the destructive canker. Instead, the president chose to play the proverbial ostrich and bury his head in the sand. He demonstrated clearly that he was not in touch with the realities of the time, that he held the most corrupt government in the history of Ghana. Rather than confront this resounding verdict of well-meaning Ghanaians, he opted for the path of delusion and denial. In summary, President Akufo-Addo lowered the bar for the fight against corruption at the Bar Conference. Yes, he lowered the bar. President Akufo-Addo lowered the bar for the fight against corruption at the Bar Conference. According to President Akufo-Addo, the avalanche of evidence of corruption which has made his government a laughingstock and the butt of all jokes is but a creation of us in opposition. He doesn't think he's responsible for all those, accolades that he has earned and so on. But he thinks everything is just the creation of opposition. He also made the astonishing claim that he has investigated every allegation of corruption and that he was not the infamous clearing agent that Ghanaians have known him to be. We wish to call on the president to jolt himself back into reality and face the truth, which is that the Ghanaian public has lost all faith in him to do anything about the mounting corruption under which his government has been buried. A multiplicity of polls and surveys carried out by credible national and international organizations show deteriorating confidence in his ability to win the fight against corruption. Ghanaians are unified in the belief that our country has been overrun by corruption, with the president sitting at the apex of a cabal representing this. The clergy, the media, civil society, and other interest groups, including consensus elders of the MPP itself, have all been unanimous in their condemnation of the levels of corruption under President Akufo-Addo. His failure to admit the existence of corruption in his government is a very clear indication that he does not even recognize the problem and cannot be counted upon to address it. Because if you don't know the problem, how do you solve it? You must recognize that we have a problem, which is a corruption problem. And he says there is no problem. So those of you who are counting on him and hoping that one day he will get up and fight corruption, your hopes will be dashed, because he doesn't even recognize that there is a problem to be solved. His claim that the uncountable number of corrupt deals and practices that have come to light since he assumed office is the handiwork of the opposition is yet another example of a leader who is totally out of sync with the aspirations and concerns of the people he governs. President Akufo-Addo must accept full responsibility for the unenviable accolade as the most corrupt president in Ghana's history, which hangs around his neck, and find out why it is so. First accept it, and go and find out why are they putting the thing on me. Then you are about solving the problem. The answer is not far-fetched, as the people of this country have been witnesses to the hypocritical and duplicitous attitude with which he has approached corruption. He believes somehow that flowery speeches and empty rhetoric delivered in an acquired accent is what convinces people that corruption is being fought. Let me repeat that. You see, our president believes that somehow flowery speeches and empty rhetoric delivered in an acquired accent is what convinces people that corruption is being fought. The Ghanaian people have been long aware that corruption is only fought on the basis of concrete steps aimed at preventing it from occurring in the first place, detecting its occurrence, and punishing those engaged in it. Yes. If today, President Akufo-Addo is dismissed as a corrupt leader, it is the outcome of his own decisions to make corruption the foundation of his government. He started off by installing the most nepotistic government in the history of Ghana, which is brimming with dozens of blood relations, known friends, and business associates. This set the tone for the public purse to be opened for exploitation by his army of appointees. Ladies and gentlemen, he promptly instituted a mechanism under which he and his close relatives captured the state in ways never seen before in our country. He and these relatives in senior government positions and some who hold no formal positions began to make familiar or business relationship with the president a key prerequisite for transactions with government. In the process, businesses with no ties to the president or his relatives became endangered species when it comes to government contracts or business. While cloaking himself in age and shallow veneer of incorruptibility, backed by spin and media hype, he implemented a nation-wrecking scheme to appropriate the resources of the state for the benefit of a chosen few. Today, key sectors of the Ghanaian economy are under the direct control of a clique of relatives and friends of the president. The pretension that this corrupt capture of state is happening on the blind side of President Akufo-Addo is no longer tenable. The shenanigan has long given way to the truth of his deep and active involvement. Borrowing a leaf from the president and his relatives' poor example, his appointees joined in the scramble for resources of the state. It would appear that everybody in the Akufo-Addo government is part of the great scramble, which itself appears to be coordinated from a master plan to loot. The consequences of this has been almost daily outbreak of scandals, which has left Ghanaians breathless and dazed at the sheer numbers and scale. Never in the history of governance in Ghana has such an all-out assault been launched on the meager resources of the poor state called Ghana. From the extraordinary corrupt Ameri multitudinous scandal in which the president nicodemously granted executive approval for a deal that was inflated by a whopping $800 million, to the PDS scandal under which cronies of Mr. Akufo-Addo and his relatives were handed a 22 billion Ghana cedis valued asset like ECG when they had not met either the financial or technical requirements, to the PPA scandal where the man appointed by the president to head the organization ended up awarding 14 contracts to himself and sold some to third parties. To the NYA scandal, where a 4.5 million Ghana cedis contract was unlawfully awarded to an entity without recourse to procurement laws, it has been established beyond all reasonable doubt that corruption is the way of life for the president and his government. How the president can turn around in the face of this glaring evidence and blame his political opponents is further proof of the bubble of denial which he lives. Many Ghanaians have been outraged by the president's claim that he has taken action in the legion of corruption cases recorded under him. Ghanaians remember quite vividly that when news broke of the Boss Movimpina corruption scandal, President Akufo-Addo stoutly defended Alfred Oben Boateng, the MD of Boss at the time, when a plethora of evidence existed to show clear violation of both the procurement law and the MPA Act. The president's defense of the Boss corruption has gone up in flames following the outcome of internal investigations, which showed that the whole transaction was illegal and criminal. When his government was caught selling seeds for cash in the infamous cash for seeds scandal, he undermined the parliamentary inquiry into the matter, but prejudicially declaring his appointees innocent even before the inquiry could be concluded. He put up a similarly robust defense when overwhelming evidence emerged of the inflation of the Oslo Chancellery building by $8 million. Also, when the deeply corrupt and embarrassing Australia visa scandal broke, he put up yet another farcical display when he proceeded to clear the officials who were supposedly investigated without telling Ghanaians who was responsible for that criminal conduct or visa racketeering, or telling Ghanaians that that racketeering never happened. You accept the thing happened, there were people accused, you come out to say that those people did nothing wrong, and yet you agree that the thing happened. Was it the work of what do you call it, dwarfs? Or what? It is his scandalous embrace of corruption that earned him the dubious accolade of a clearing agent, and not a phantom effort by the opposition to tag him with corruption. The president leads a government that is primed to engage in corruption, and he must admit it. Right when he was forming the government, he knew the type of government he would choose. And when that type of government is installed, it can only be corrupt. And he went for it. And it is delivering the expected results. So that is it. He was in a hurry, maybe. The president's outing in Takoradi yesterday and his